The Sun and Wayward Stars by ThBiButterfly. Chapter 8. Something New.
Did you see them? His head was on Remus's lap, Sirius groused, slamming the door.
Regulus opened his eyes and blinked rapidly. He'd fallen asleep on a swing after Remus left, and he was suddenly quite awake at the sound of his brother's voice. Sighing, he snugged up with the jumper that Remus left him to use as a pillow. Normally, he didn't enjoy midday kips, but Remus managed to lull him into a comfortable state between the rocking swing and his fingers stroking through Regulus's hair. He closed his eyes again, unwilling to deal with Sirius's malcontent just now. Potter released a sound that landed somewhere between a sigh and a grunt. "I have eyes too, Sirius."
Remus was practically dancing out of here when he left.
"What was that about?" Sirius questioned, his voice strained.
"It doesn't make any bloody sense."
"Sure it does," Potter grumbled. "If they both like blokes." He shifted restlessly. Remus made Regulus laugh. Full-on laugh. Have you ever seen him do that?
"Well, yes,
but not recently," Sirius admitted. Huffing in annoyance, Potter started to explain further when he came to an abrupt halt. Sirius might have crashed into him because both of them spluttered in surprise.
"Look,"
Potter whispered loudly. Sirius let out a long sigh. "All right, that's fucking adorable. Shit."
"Should we wake him up?"
Potter asked, hopefully. "Nah, let him sleep. Flirting with Remus must be so exhausting," Sirius drawled, snorting dirtily. Potter cleared his throat. "You sure? Maybe we should just jack—" "He's fine, James. Come on. I want to run into the woods," Sirius insisted, huffing impatiently. All right, Potter acquiesced, his voice wistful. "If he's still out when we get back," Sirius nodded, "then we'll wake him up. Let's go. I have rabbits to chase." Potter chuckled. "Yeah, that does sound fun." As they walked away, Regulus remained still until he was sure they were out of view. He stretched out on the bench and pulled himself upright. Shrugging on Remus's enormous jumper, Regulus pushed the swing back and forth slowly. It was comforting, sitting here in the silence, buried in a cozy knit jumper. He saw the appeal. Remus seemed to have quite a few things figured out that Regulus never even bothered to consider. Although he was clearly biased when it came to his mates, that was abundantly clear. How he could look at James toe-rag Potter, as Evans so eloquently crowned him, and see a wonderful boyfriend was well beyond him. The bloke was so busy talking himself up, he couldn't see past his own ego. When it came to Sirius, however, Remus had him sorted perfectly. Regulus recognized that Sirius's territorial tendencies would likely translate from best mate to boyfriend fairly easily if he actually did fancy blokes. Whether that important detail was true or not, Remus's plan would likely expose the answer far faster than if he just waited Sirius out. His brother was incredibly observant of everyone, except himself. Never one for introspection. Sirius could be ridiculously oblivious to his own thoughts and feelings. Regulus was curious what Sirius would do, though. He couldn't decide if Sirius reacted so viscerally to Remus's flirting with him because he was overprotective, or if he was jealous. It wasn't entirely clear just yet. Despite the confusion they were creating, Regulus enjoyed the little game with Remus. The two of them had exactly zero chemistry, which was a shame, really, but Regulus enjoyed his company and attention anyway. Admittedly, he'd never had a proper boyfriend before. The blokes he'd spent time with in the past were far more focused on the physical benefits of a relationship than any emotional connections. Regulus was fine with that, honestly. It made breaking things off easier and he could avoid the whole social backlash of a proper breakup that he'd watched his mate's face. It looked so messy and painful. Alternatively, Regulus relied rather heavy on its mates for emotional support, and they weren't always particularly willing to carry that burden. He found himself hiding away in the library or his dorm far more often than seeking out their company lately. Every time he analyzed his own behavior, he was faced with a startling truth. He was lonely. It was likely why he'd finally attempted to fix his relationship with Sirius. Already he'd felt more accepted among his brother's friends than he had in his own house at school. When he'd left for winter break, Regulus hadn't even told any of his friends that he was staying with Sirius, just to be cautious. He knew Pandora would never rat him out like that, but Barty and Evan came from pure-blood families. It was better to keep them ignorant until after the fact. They were under a lot of pressure from their parents as it was. Regulus didn't feel it necessary to add to that stress. Dorcas was a year older and not particularly fond of Gryffindors, so she definitely wouldn't have approved. "All right, Regulus," Peter called out, waving to him as he wandered out of the house. Glancing up, Regulus shook his head clear. "Hi, Peter." He shifted to one side, leaving room for Peter on the swing. "I thought you left with Remus." Peter smiled. "Nah, I'm going to crash here tonight. I don't live far away, so I pop in off and on." He settled into the swing next to Regulus, tucking his legs underneath him. As Regulus pushed off the ground and set the swing in motion, Peter watched him intently. Finally, he reached over and tapped Regulus's hand. "Mind if I ask you a question, Regulus?" "I can guarantee you I'll answer it, but go on," Regulus replied. "Fair enough," Peter agreed, rocking along with his swing. "Do you believe in fate? Like we're destined to do things, or find someone in particular?" "That was 3 questions," Regulus chuckled. Peter flashed an eager grin. "I'm full of them. Could give you a few more?" Regulus shook his head. "That's plenty, thank you." He leaned back against the swing and stared at the sky. "As for fate, I can't say I have an opinion on that one. My experience is that most of what happens in life is so far out of my own control that I can hardly identify if someone else is pulling the strings or if it's just truly due to the randomness of the universe." "That was deep," Peter commented, nodding slowly. Tilting his head, Regulus studied Peter carefully. "It really wasn't. Are you all right?" I'm great," Peter replied enthusiastically. He pulled out a tin out of his pocket. "Want to split a spiff with me?" "What is it?" Regulus asked, frowning at the container. Peter smiled. "Kind of like cigarettes, but stronger. Have you ever smoked before?" "Of course," Regulus answered easily. He never picked up the habit himself, but tended to seek them out when he drank at parties. "A hopeful friend of mine grows it. Pretty potent," Peter warned. He pulled out his wand and lit the end. "Should be alright to try it. Effie is a healer by trade, so if you have a bad time, she can fix you up pretty quickly." Regulus shrugged. "All right then, go on." He was intrigued by the idea and figured it wouldn't hurt to try something new while he was so far from his parents' purview. Peter nodded, then took a long haul of the end. He held the smoke inside him for a good long time before smoothly blowing it out of his nose. Handing the spliff to Regulus, Peter sat back against the bench. Staring at the spliff, Regulus scrunched his nose up at the smell. Cigarettes were bad enough, but he had to scrub his clothes clean after smoking them. This, on the other hand, was truly foul. Swallowing hard, Regulus took out a small half of the split, choking immediately. He cleared his throat several times and he eyed Peter quizzically. What am I doing wrong? Try again. It takes practice, Peter explained. I used to choke on it too. Regulus chewed his bottom lip. If you say so. He took a longer haul this time, trying to follow Peter's example and hold it in his lungs. Within seconds, he was choking it back out. Hauling it back to Peter, he gagged. That's so gross, Peter. How do you smoke this thing? Nah, it's not that bad, Peter denied, taking the spliff back to inhale it deeply from it. Probably ought to take it easy on you, first try anyway. Leaning back against the seat, Regulus felt a bit hazy all of a sudden. It wasn't unpleasant, but a bit disconcerting. He gazed up at the clouds and rocked the swing slowly. The sky seemed to move so quickly now, the clouds scattering across the sky. Regulus grinned. That's interesting. It is, isn't it? Peter agreed. He hauled the spliff back to Regulus. Now, try again. Regulus took the spliff without really looking at it, held it up to his lips and drew a long haul. He closed his eyes and savored the heavy feeling of it, in his chest for a moment. As the smoke swirled in his mouth, Regulus smiled lazily. Much better. See, you can't even smell it after a while, Peter said, following his lead and leaning back against the swing, head tilted up to the sky. They passed the spliff back and forth for several more times before it was fully finished. Regulus was fully blissed out, eyes glazed over, and a goon grin spread across his face. Peter was giggling wildly about some random thought in his head that Regulus was fairly sure he thought he said out loud. The overthinking switch in Regulus's brain was firmly shut off, relieving him of one burden at last. By the time Potter and Sirius wandered out of the woods, Regulus was snorting with laughter watching Peter attempt to walk through the garden. Still perched on the swing, his face flushed as he cackled at the unsteady bloke for falling into the bushes for the 9th time. They finished the spliff. When they'd finished the spliff, Peter admitted that was his 3rd of the day. He subsequently insisted on illustrating how impaired he actually was at the moment. Try the other way, Regulus encouraged, pointing in the opposite direction. There's more stones that way, less plants to trip over. Clever you, Peter agreed, swiveling on his heels and holding his hands out like a tight-rope walker as he walked along the pavement stones with his eyes on the ground. He made it 4 steps before crashing into a tree. Bursting out laughing, Regulus fell back against the swing and slid down the prone position. He held his middle as he surrendered into the fit, shaking wildly. Everything was impossibly funny, and he enjoyed the chaos of the feeling. What are you, Peter? Are you high? Sirius asked, leaning down to examine his friends. Glancing up at Regulus, he frowned. Did you get Reggie high too? He wanted to, Peter announced, flaying his hands at Sirius. You want one? Sirius shook his head. I'm all right, mate. Let's get you back to your feet. Potter's eyebrows soared up his forehead. Regulus is high? Has he ever... Nope, Peter asked, grinning at Regulus fondly. I'd say he's handling it well. Regulus promptly fell off the swing and hit the grass hard. He sprawled on his back and stared up the sky. Just over his head, the swing continued to rock, narrowly missing his face each time. Finding that incredibly funny, he giggled to himself. I see that, Potter replied, pressing his lips together.
Sirius groaned. For fuck's sake, Peter, stand up! I thought I was standing up, Peter said, blinking rapidly. He slid down further to the ground. James, you monitor Giggles over there. I need to get this daft fool in the house. He's busted his nose open, Sirius ordered, lifted Peter under his arms. Come on, you twat. Stepping closer, Potter crouched down next to Regulus. He lifted a hand to catch the swing, slowly to a stab, but his gaze remained on Regulus, searching his face curiously. Glancing back to make sure they were alone, Potter reached out to brush Regulus's hair from his face. You are right. It's too hot in here. Regulus huffed, pulling from the jumper Remus loaned him. He struggled a bit to pull himself up and whipped the jumper over his head. Potter helped him sit upright, one hand supporting his back. When Regulus started unbuttoning his shirt, Potter's eyes widened. What are you doing? Told you, I'm too bloody warm, Regulus complained, staring down at the tiny buttons. He managed to get the top half of the shirt unbuttoned before pulling it out of his trouser and wrenching it over his head. Falling back against the grass, he sighed. That's better. I don't think that's a good idea, Potter choked out as he turned to look away. Regulus sighed heavily. I do. It feels lovely. He lifted his hands behind his head and settled in. Grass is a bit tickly, though. Wriggling a bit, he found a more comfortable position. Potter was actively avoiding him and swallowing hard. He chewed anxiously on his bottom lip, eyes flitting around the landscape. Regulus watched him for a few minutes, amused by his reaction. It was rather silly, honestly. The bloke was a Quidditch player. Surely he'd seen other blokes shirtless before. What's wrong with you? Regulus asked, studying his face through narrowed eyes. Nothing, Potter denied, refusing to turn his head. Rolling his eyes, Regulus scoffed. Such a prude. What? I am not, Potter denied, head snapping abruptly. He winced when it cracked with emotion. As his eyes flittered over Regulus' figure, he inhaled deeply and bit down on his lip. I do think you should put your shirt back on. Sirius will be back soon. My brother has seen me stark naked on multiple occasions. I doubt he'll care, Regulus snarked, shaking his head slowly. Just relax, Potter. It's not for your benefit. James, he corrected, hazel eyes flashing intensely. Regulus arched an eyebrow. Yes, that is your first name. I'm aware. Could you use it? Potter suggested, rubbing the back of his neck. Why? Regulus asked, tilting his head to the side. Potter shrugged. I don't know. You don't call Remus or Peter by their last names. I like Remus and Peter, noted Regulus, smirking up at him. Huffing in frustration, Potter pulled his knees up to his chest. Yeah, I noticed. Is this a complex or something? You need to be liked? He glanced over at Regulus. Are you normally this difficult, or is this special treatment just for me? Regulus snorted a laugh. Depends on who you ask, I suppose. I'm sure most people find me difficult. His lips twitched in amusement. So you're not being especially mean to me? Oh no, I definitely am, Regulus affirmed. He looked back up at him at the clouds and grinned. I have entirely valid reasons for that, though, so I don't feel guilty. Reasons like... Potter trailed off, folding his legs underneath him and turning to face Regulus directly. Regulus squinted up at him. You're an arrogant prat. All right, I really need you to stop saying that, Potter sighed, shoving his glasses into his forehead and rubbing a hand over his face. Because you like it? Regulus checked. Potter choked on his own spit, gasping. Why would you say that? Remus said so, Regulus answered promptly, among other observations I've made thus far. Can we not discuss that? Not interested in discussing your kinks, Potter, Regulus assured him, rolling his eyes. Believe it or not everyone doesn't have to like you. Some people find you annoying, and you just have to accept that. Leaning his elbows on his knees, Potter rested his chin on his hands. Annoying? That's better than hating me. I can work with annoying. I was not talking about me, Regulus snarked, stretching out into the grass. He reached above his head, tapping his fingers against the bottom of the swing. Just people, in general. Oh, how do you find me then? Potter asked, watching him curiously. Regulus closed his eyes and sighed. Barely tolerable. You don't hate me though, right? That's hardly a growing recommendation, Regulus pointed out, lifting his chin and leaning his head back. The sun felt good on his skin, like the balm to the soul. He imagined himself as a cat, sunbathing in the glorious golden light. The thought made him grin. If I was an animagus, I think I'd be a cat. Potter let out a startled laugh. What kind of cat? Orange tabby, I think. Something brightly colored and sassy, Regulus decided. I'd spend the entire day chasing butterflies and sleeping in the sun. Sassy certainly fits, Potter noted, shaking his head. Regulus rolled into his stomach, then reached out for Remus's jumper, stuffing the knitwear under his head. Regulus snuggled up with it as he drifted off. He felt Potter's thumb stroke along his cheek. Regulus ignored it, focused on the floating feeling that carried him off to oblivion. Hello. Thank you for watching this one. I've read this fic like quite a while ago before, so I completely forgot this happened. And when I just find it so fucking funny because I don't believe in many fics you see Regulus high or something like that, but I always find it funny when it is, because Regulus also is described as a controlled person, but when he's high or drunk or something like that, it's always so funny to read. And it's always very funny to read the interactions with James and Regulus in such a moment. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed reading it again. And also the orange tabby cat, I believe that's a hint to the theory of that Regulus is Crookshanks or something, and I really think that's funny. Have a nice day. I hope you enjoyed this chapter, and well, bye! Oh, and also the link is in the description if you want to read ahead, and please give kudos and or comments to the author who made this amazing fic. Okay, now I'm gonna shut up.